Слава Ісусу Христу!
Слава навіки!
Моя промова, я буду говорити по-англійськи, але я також написав по-українськи, то якщо вас цікавить, я можу вам дати по-українськи, щоб може ліпше зрозуміти. Але я буду говорити по-англійськи, добре? Мене звати Юрко Velychkovsky. My name is George Velychkovsky, and I share the same last name with Blessed Vasyl. Christine and I are here from Austin. That's 2,400 kilometers or 1,500 miles from here. It's a road that Father John has made. He knows it well. And we're honored here to be here to celebrate Blessed Vasyl's feast day. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have met somebody named Velychkovsky, other than Blessed Vasyl? Oh, now I feel blessed. But you know, the truth is, we're no different than you are. Our life's goal is to help each other get to heaven. And that's something I'm sure we all share in this church. How many of you have met Blessed Vasyl personally? Well, you're very blessed and you're very special, right? I met Blessed Vasyl with my brothers, Roman and Ihor, and our parents, back on August 24th, 1972, when he made a surprising visit to a Boy Scout camp, Plast camp. The camp had no plans for him to attend, but when he heard there was a camp, he wanted to come and meet the youth. He had no idea we were there, that his family was even there. And I remember meeting him for approximately 10 minutes. I knelt down, kissed his ring. He looked me in the eye and he blessed me. And it lasted about 10 minutes. And surprisingly, my father, who was an avid photographer, did not take a single picture of us and Blessed Vasyl. And to this day, we question what happened. I think he was just as stunned as we were. Anyway, that moment that I met him for 10 minutes is something that later in my life has completely taken hold of me and inspired me, and it has had a lasting impact on me for many, many years, up to and including this day today. How did it inspire me? I developed a deep curiosity, as Father John said, about Blessed Vasyl's life, his ancestry, his family, and people who influenced them. And last year, I was fortunate to collaborate with a Redemptorist priest called Ruslan Pich to issue a research paper on Blessed Vasyl's priestly lineage. I think in yesterday's Vespers, there was a line in there that said he comes from a priestly lineage. Well, what exactly does that mean? And there's a paper that I have a copy of it with me that explains to you in excruciating detail what exactly that means. And it's something that is hard to imagine in today's day and age. We put together the paper from various church records. The good news about Polish occupation of Western Ukraine was that they maintained records, annual records of who the pastors were of every parish, their birth dates, their wives' names, and all those records were available to us to kind of go back and figure out his father, his grandfather, and so on. We were able to track his priestly heritage back to 1670, where the first priest, Father Luke Velychkovsky, was the first priest in his lineage. So that lineage, Luke Velychkovsky was his fourth grandfather. And every person under Luke was also a priest. So by name, if you will, it was Father Luke, Father Michael, Father Pavlo, Father Ivan Chrysostom, Father Julian, Father Volodymyr, and the last priest in the lineage was Blessed Vasyl. That spanned 300 years, and there were 27 priests in total as part of that family. Almost a dynasty in the Catholic Church in Ukraine, right? Very hard to replicate something like that today, right? On his mother's side, we know that his grandfather, Mykola Teodorovich, was a very influential priest, and he's the one who talked Blessed Vasyl's father from giving up law school and becoming a priest. And when he became a priest, he met Father Teodorovich's daughter, and they got married, and that's Blessed Vasyl's parents. His mother also came from a whole priestly lineage that I'm sure if I began talking to it, you would probably, I'd probably put you to sleep. So on the paternal side, which is my last name, His paternal grandparents were Father Julian and Olenka Velychkovsky. They both died in their 40s. Father Julian went duck hunting, caught pneumonia, and died literally 3 months after that, and his wife, Olenka, died 3 months after that. So both his grandparents on his father's side dead in their 40s, and they left 6 children behind. Now think about today, what happens with the 6 children? Who's going to influence them? What are they going to grow up to be? How many stories have you heard of tragedies where infants have no parents? But all 6 were taken up by family and by friends. And I can personally tell you that if somebody approaches you and said, hey, look, you have 4 kids, we have another one for you to take, that is not an easy decision. And yet all 6 were adopted by family and friends. And 2 of them became priests. So we talked about family today, one of the armors. And it just shows you that 6 children were adopted after their parents were died by family and friends. 2 became priests. 2 of the sisters married priests. So out of 4 of the 6 children became priests and continued the lineage of priestly service. So Blessed Vasyl's father was Father Volodymyr, as you well know, and his youngest brother was Dionys, or today's words, Dennis, right? And another interesting story is that 2 of Dionys' sisters married priests. Also, I think I mentioned that. So here's a curious point. So Blessed Vasyl's father married Anna Teodorovich, but what's largely unknown is that her brother, Evstachi Teodorovich, married Volodymyr's sister. So again, you see family, just the role of family and bonding within these priestly people in Ukraine. We all know that Blessed Vasyl's mother became a nun after her husband's death, and she entered the monastery. Her other sister was a nun and prioress, while the other sister became an abbess after her husband's death. Sister Monica was her name, and she was imprisoned by the Russians and exiled and is currently under consideration for beatification. As I mentioned, my grandfather Dennis was Blessed Vasyl's youngest brother. He was a priest, and he died in 1927, again at the age of 40. Just like his father, he died at 40. His circumstances was there was an Austrian-Hungarian raid of a town called Horocholina. And he and his wife were praying in the house while they were raiding the town, and they were indiscriminately shooting bullets throughout the town, and one of the bullets grazed his head. And that led later in life to paralysis and eventually death. So again, you see a whole nother generation of children affected by evil, if you will, and yet surviving, right? At that time, when my grandfather died, Blessed Vasyl was 23 years old. My father was 2 years old. So again, there's a 21-year difference, right? But I'll tell you, Blessed Vasyl and his 2 sisters knew our family well. They kept in touch with us. He kept in touch particularly with my grandmother and he kept in touch with us through letters until his last days here in Winnipeg. You know, in today's world, it's just hard for me to even imagine being surrounded and growing up in a world of all your loved ones who are dedicated to serving God. It's inconceivable in today's world, right? And we know that from Blessed Vasyl's autobiography, especially his mother, his father, as he writes, his grandparents, his Aunt Maria, who became Sister Monica, had a tremendous influence on his spirituality and his decision to enter the monastic life as a Redemptorist priest. So without question, his background, his ancestry had a significant role in his identity, in his values, in his beliefs, as well as providing him with a sense of connecting to something larger than himself. That's interesting, but you know what? We've learned that ancestry doesn't guarantee anything. At the end of the day, we all have free wills, and we have to make our own decisions. We know that Blessed Vasyl's faith and his belief in God were unwavering. And what are some examples that we as a family see of that? We know that He was unwavering in following God's will and in those around him through his strength, his words, his faith, to many people seeing him, listening to him, receiving the Eucharist from him. It was contagious. And as he progressed through life, in 1945, his life takes a tremendous turn. He is asked to refuse his Catholic faith, and he refuses to do that. And as a result, he's arrested and taken to the basement of NKVD headquarters in the village of Chartkiw. So imagine you've been living a priestly life, and one day everything comes to a complete stop, and you can be released, go back to your normal life, if you just say, look, I will join the Russian Orthodox Church, I will renounce my faith, and I can go back to living a normal life. But that's not what he chose to do. That is a very, very difficult decision. So what happens next to him? He's sitting in Chartkiw for 2 months, and he is continuously interrogated. Thanks to the KGB documents that were released after Ukraine became independent, we learned that these interrogations sometimes lasted 12 hours, one lasted 2 days. They tortured him with sleeplessness, isolation. Can you imagine how lonely he felt? This lasted for almost a year. The loneliness he felt, the interrogations, the physical and moral abuse he had to survive, the food deprivation, it was all designed to break him down and break his willpower. And I can tell you, for our children, we have taught our children that to accomplish anything in life, it's very simple. All you need is inspiration and ability. And I said, unfortunately, today's youth is very much worried about ability, but it's my belief that inspiration is probably more valuable. And so you have to think about Blessed Vasyl here, from Chartkiw to Kyiv for an entire year, being tortured. Where did he get his inspiration? Who inspired him? And you have to believe that he thought about where he came from. But most importantly, it's clear that he was inspired by our Lord. Without that inspiration, he would have never made it through it. It's an incredible, incredible testament to the power of Jesus Christ, right? It's interesting because if you were, for example, arrested, you'd like to know what's next. What's going to happen to me? Is there going to be a trial in a month? Am I going to be shipped somewhere? For a year, they wouldn't tell him what he could expect. He had no idea for an entire year, as part of his mental torture, of what's going to happen to him. When his interrogators would go to lunch, no doubt to drink, they would lock him in a wooden crate. Remember, you're sleepless, you're hungry, and now they're going to lock you in a wooden box as they go to lunch, get drunk, come back, and then continue asking you the exact same questions, hour after hour after hour after hour. It's incredible how ruthless and evil people can be to another human being, isn't it? And putting that aside, it's incredible that he survived that, and he never wavered. And of course, after his, that led, by the way, to finally a trial in Kyiv, and they put him on death row. So I think if you kind of think of where his head was, after a year of unbelievable torture, he now knows that he is on death row and he can prepare for death. He doesn't know when they're going to kill him, but he knows that he has some finality to his life, some purpose. And he's on death row for 3 years. Every morning he wakes up thinking, I think this is my day, because the people around him are being taken to death row. So for 3 years he's on death row, and everything changes when his mother writes a letter to Joseph Stalin begging him for her son's life. And so they reduce his sentence to 10 years imprisonment. And now you have to think back, what was he doing in prison? What was his life in prison like? And just to show you his strength and his inspiration, what he did was brought the Word of God, and he recognized that the greatest gift you can give to people is the Eucharist. Without the Eucharist, for any one of us, it is very difficult to get to heaven. What did he do to bring these people the Eucharist? You can go to the museum. He used glass from eyeglasses as a chalice. He put grapes in there. He was committed to confessing people in prison, to giving them the Eucharist and bringing them to Christ. It was said that a lot of the prison guards there were scared of him. They had recognized that there was something different about him, his faith, his strong belief. And he had actually ministered to some of his captors secretly, because if they found out, they would be imprisoned as well, right? So he comes back to Lviv, right? And he begins developing the church as the head of the Ukrainian church in Ukraine. And everything goes well until something again happens. He gets arrested again, and this time he gets taken to, this is his last imprisonment now. What did they do to him? Well, they began torture again. Remember, you've just gotten 10 years plus the 1 year, and it's back to exactly what you thought you had already finished and completed. What do they want from him? Why are they torturing him? Well, they wanted information about the Catholic Church. Who are the people in the Catholic Church in Ukraine? We need to capture these people and extinguish that church in that country. It's a threat to their government. And of course, they kept asking him to renounce his faith. What did they do to him? They gave him chemicals that affected his nervous system, his heart. He was tortured by electricity, electric shocks. And then when they sensed that he was going to die, it's very unclear, but they gave him a one-way ticket out of Ukraine to his sister in Croatia. He didn't know it was a one-way ticket. But very unusual for that regime to take somebody and release them. They were scared that he was going to die a martyr on their soil and they'd be accountable for it. So by releasing him, that was their Pontius Pilate moment. They had released all accountability for what had transpired to him. Through all this, from everything I've read and all the letters I have, we know that he stayed focused on one thing: spreading the work of God, and most importantly, providing the Eucharist to everybody around him. And given, obviously, the years that he spent in prison led to something that Father John talked about. He was proclaimed the patron of prison ministry, almost an obvious choice. And thanks to the work of many people here, that was done on July 20th, 2014 in Zadvanicha. I think there's a video that you can get, and it shows you the massive people and the celebration. And my niece Irina, I think, was on the stage, and his nephew Cornell, who passed away. So let me just talk to you a little bit about what we know about, from a family perspective, what we knew about Blessed Vasyl. Well, his nickname was Vashko. Vashko is a Ukrainian derivative. I mean, the beautiful thing about the Ukrainian language is no matter what your name is, there's going to be a real nice nickname for you. So instead of Yuri, it's going to be Yuricha. Instead of Irina, it's going to be Iricha. His was Vashko. They called him Vashko, right? And he was known as a spiritual, kind, and caring individual who would do anything for his family and as well as the communities around him. He found that he had an ability to preach at missions. And most importantly, in addition to preaching, he encouraged people to confess and receive the Eucharist. By the way, he was a human being. He showed his many faults, right? We know he smoked cigarettes. He had a love for cigarettes. He admits that in his autobiography. And the question is, where did he get this love of cigarettes, right? Very strange, right? We have a photograph of his family, his father, his mother, his two sisters, him, and their children. This is a family portrait done by a photographer, I assume, back in the day. His father's holding a cigar. What person would bring a cigar to a family photo? So it's obviously his father had an influence him on smoking cigarettes. It's a habit that he kicked later in life, but nonetheless, he was showing you some of his human side. The other thing we know is that when he was in a seminary in Lviv, he had a hard time with his grades for at least one of his classes. And he failed his exams the first time, and if you read his autobiography, the second time, he claims that the only reason he passed it was because the bishop fell asleep when he was answering the questions, and then he said, okay, you pass, right? And so the question is, I mean, when you take a look at his troubles at school, many of us had trouble in school, some of our kids have trouble. Is it inspiration or ability? Clearly, it must have been a subject that he had no inspiration to listen to. How many times have yours kids say, I'm taking an archaeology class, what impact is that going to have on my life? And the inspiration disappears, and the grades suffer, right? My Uncle Joseph was also a priest, not a priest. He entered the seminary, and he struggled with grades, strangely enough. And Blessed Vasyl kept track of him, and he wrote a letter to Cardinal Slipe, he wasn't cardinal back then, asking him for his help in getting my uncle to achieve his lifelong dream of becoming a priest. And Cardinal Slipe, we actually found these letters in the Lviv seminary. And Cardinal Slipe's response is rather dull. He says, look, there's not going to be any help. He's going to have to earn his way in. Sorry about that. Nonetheless, he reached out to help. And the story with my Uncle Joseph is the war broke out, and he escaped to the U.S. never to become a priest, right? To give you kind of a glimpse of what kind of person he was and what his life was about, I found a letter from his sister Vera to my grandmother Irina and to my uncle. The letter was dated June 7, 1959. So let me read just a piece of that letter for you. It'll give you kind of a highlight of what his life was about, right? So here's his sister Vera talking to my grandmother and my uncle. My dearest aunt and brother, I have to notify you of some very sad news. My mother, Anna Velychkovska, died on the first Friday of the month. Vasyl arrived for his visit with her at the monastery on Wednesday, the 4th of February, just like he did every first Friday of every month. And on Thursday, when he arrived, like he did before every Friday, his mother asked him for confession. And so he confessed his mother and the nun that lived with her. After confessing her, they both knelt down to receive the Eucharist from her son, Blessed Vasyl. My mother suffered a weakened heart, but was still able to walk, and she was still able to kneel down to receive communion. After communion, they sat around the table having dinner, and then my mother laid down to sleep. She took her last breath at 2:30 in the morning with Blessed Vasyl at her side. Vasyl wrote to me saying that my mother died without any pain or suffering, and at the moment of her last breath, a beautiful smile appeared on her lips, as if she saw Christ, her beloved Lord of 81 and a half years. What a beautiful letter. It's something to find out of nowhere in a box describing how he was with her mother and how she got the Eucharist and was able to confess right before her death up to the point of her last breath. So, where's his family today? Remember, the Velychkovskys were a small family in Halachina, that small western area between Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk, Kolomea. That's where the whole family was. Well, today, Blessed Vasyl Vera's grandchildren and great-grandchildren still live in Croatia. His sister Barbara's family have all passed away without any descendants. The Velychkovsky family that once lived in Halachina are scattered around the entire globe. His father's sister, Stephanie's granddaughter, and their families live in San Diego and Boston. My grandfather's grandchildren live in Lviv, Rudno, Kolomea, Luchk, Uzhhorod, Rome, Poland, Slovakia, Tel Aviv, Austin, Columbus, Ohio, Miami, Lakeland, Pittsburgh, and Toronto. That's how spread out we are. His great-grandfather's brother lives in Stamford, Connecticut, New Jersey, and his mother's family lives in Minneapolis, New York, and New Jersey. So after 400 years, we are completely spread around the entire globe. Now, despite being spread all around the world and challenged by the passage of time, our extended family, his extended family, has remained together, and I can tell you we are all united in prayer to Blessed Vasyl and his martyrdom. Through his prayers and his intercession, he inspired me to pursue and write multiple research papers about his ancestry. And if you met me in my youth, I would be the last one you picked to ever be interested in ancestry. I can guarantee you that. So in addition to inspiring me to write multiple research papers about his ancestry, I have gone out of my way to seek and unite his family. I've gone to Ukraine, I've reached out to people I never knew, and they recognize me as family, and it's just been a beautiful thing, right? I've also reached out with my wife to help underprivileged families, and after 7 years, I've been trying to start a church in Austin, Texas, and we've now been given a mission. It's called Catholic Mission of St. Andrew the First Named, a mission that this Easter attracted 420 people for the Easter Mass. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that our family is grateful to everyone here. We are grateful to Father John, to Lasha, to Mary Jane, to the entire staff here for everything they've done over the decades to remember his memory and to bring the Word of God to you. And if I could just ask you to join us in a moment of thanks for the Sanchuks and the family here. Anyway, you're probably wondering when lunch is going to be served, and I have one more sentence, and then you're ready for lunch. Anyway, thank you for taking time to celebrate his feast day with us. I implore you to please pray for peace in Ukraine. May God bless you, and may your prayers for Blessed Vasyl's intercession be granted. Slava Ісусу Христу.
Слава навіки. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very, very good. Thank you.